have like Generation X and some of the millennials, their dads are well, make sure you're independent, make sure you're independent instead of interdependence.
Yeah, I think that there's a mistake by some women conflating being a simp with being a traditional man, because they will say that traditional men are providers and protectors and all of that. And so what they're conflating is that they think that traditional men, they're equating traditional men with men that pay all of the bills and make sure that they provide them with a work or a certain lifestyle. I don't think that that's necessarily the only thing that they should be looking at when they having these conversations. Women are looking, in a sense, some of these women that still have a liberal mindset, they are looking for a guy that saves them from themselves when they've advocated for going out and being able to do it themselves. They don't want a 50-50 relationship when it comes to finances, but they want a 50-50 relationship when it comes to having say so of what goes on inside of the household. And so if you want a traditional conservative man, then you got to get it all the way on the other side. They don't want the extreme, they want the hybrid. And so when I hear women a lot of times say that they want a conservative or a traditional man, I don't believe them, because I think that they want a version of both. They still want to be heard, they want to say so, but they don't necessarily want to pay bills, and they don't want the responsibility. Myron, what are your thoughts? What's going on, big dog?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say it. Women are stupid, and what I mean by this when I say women are stupid is that here's the issue, and this is a disconnect. Women expect you to adhere to your traditional masculine traits, while they simultaneously can pick and choose when they can be a lady and adhere to their traditional traits. So in other words, kind of what you were saying before, they want the guy to be a decisive decision maker that could pay all the bills and take care of them if someone breaks into the house. But at the same time, they're reserved the right to disobey you, be, rude, rambunctious, and feel as though their opinion really matters. When in reality, the whole purpose and the whole reason why they were attracted to you in the first place is because you don't give a fuck about their opinion. The simple reality is women are not attracted to their equals. They're attracted to men that are superior to them in every way. Competence, strength, income, resources, status. They want a guy that's superior to them in every way, but then they want to go ahead and be treated like an equal, and that's just not how the way the world works. So what I tell guys kind of to understand is that when you deal with a woman, you're effectively her boss, which means she dresses the way you tell her to. She does what she's supposed to do. She adheres to her jobs and duties, and if she doesn't, she could be written up and or fired from the job. And I think that's how men have to kind of deal with women nowadays, because I find it absolutely ludicrous that women will sit there and, follow their boss more than they follow their husband. Their husband will tell them, I don't like the way that you're dressed. And they'll say, well, why? Why are you being insecure? But if they showed up to work dressed in a certain way and their boss said, you need to go home and change, they would go ahead and change. And this is where we kind of have to call out the bullshit, where if you're going to go ahead and be a traditional man, that comes with them being a traditional lady, which means them obeying you. And whenever I say women need to obey men, they get all angry at me and stuff. But that kind of reveals the feminism inside them, because a lot of women will sit there and say, oh, I'm a traditional woman. But then if you say something like, well, I need a woman that obeys me, they'll be like, what do you mean obey? And that's one of the fastest ways to identify these undercover chameleon type feminists, because a lot of women do have feminist tendencies, despite the fact that they might say that they're, traditional. But when the rubber meets the road, you tell them to do things, or you try to instruct them on certain things, they don't want to listen, or they might question your authority. And this is why I think it's so important for men to not just be competent, but be better than their girl in every regard. So it brings, it mitigates the risk of them not listening to you. I kind of always look at women like Pokemon, right? For anyone that played Pokemon back in the day, you need to have a certain amount of badges as the Pokemon starts to level up. And if, let's say, you don't have enough badges and you tell, a Charizard to attack and he falls asleep, that's kind of how women are. You need to have your badges up at a certain point and beat the Elite Four a bunch of times so that when you give her a command, she listens. And I think if more men applied this concept to women, where they're basically fucking Pokemon, and you need to become the best gym trainer and get them under your authority based on your competence as that trainer, then they'll listen. And I know some women might not like hearing this, or they don't want that, but the reality is, if a guy works his ass off to get to a certain position where he's your partner, well, he had to fucking go through a lot of rings and he had to suffer to get to that position. So I'll be damned if a woman's going to tell me how to run things when I had to bust my ass to create my value. Meanwhile, she was giving her value. And this is another thing that women don't understand. Women live life on easy mode. We live life on extra hard mode. So if we do get to a position where we're an entrepreneur, we're making 6 figures a year, 7 figures a year, etc., we're going to demand something in response to that, because to find a guy like me is going to be significantly harder than for me to find a woman like you. And this is another problem. Women don't understand that they're abundant and they're very common. The things that women provide to men that we actually value, femininity, not being fat, not being rude, not being annoying, not being a whore, you can find it, right? It's not as rare as a guy who's successful that has his shit together. So the reality is our standards are a lot lower than theirs. Since our standards are lower and we're not looking for, a top 1% woman like they're not, while they look for a top 1% guy, well, we can replace them easier than they can replace us. And this is another problem with feminism where we lie to women and tell them that these higher status men are abundant and they want to go ahead and tolerate the fuckery. But the reality is they don't want to. They just want to have sex with these girls. And women always conflate options for real men that want to take them seriously. And just because you can fuck a higher status guy doesn't necessarily mean you'll be able to keep a higher status guy. So this discrepancy in availability in the opposite gender is another thing that fucks women up. So to sum it up, I'll say this. Women need to get more realistic and understand that they're not the prize. And then they also need to understand that if they're with an exceptional man, they need to make exceptions and acquiesce to that man's frame. If you don't, fine, no problem. It's a matter of time. Either he cheats on you or you get bored and you leave, and he'll go find another girl that will go on his program because higher status men are rare versus beautiful women are not. And we need to really have this wake-up call with women in America and feminists in general and let them know, look, feminism is here. You guys want men that are on your level, if not better. Feminism has effectively made dating harder for you guys because your standards have went up, and alongside that, a lot of the men haven't went up. So a minority of men actually rise up to the standard that most women want. You no longer have the leverage that you thought you did. You guys went ahead and said, we're going to enter the workforce and be independent. Congratulations, you're independent of average men. What's left? Higher status guys, and they're going to want something in return.
Do you think liberals can't be masculine?
I'm sorry? What was that?
Do you think that liberals can't be masculine?
In most cases, no. And the reason why is because as a progressive or as a liberal, a lot of the times liberals and progressives tend to believe in blank slate equality, where we're saying like, oh, men and women are equal. That right there is a faulty premise to begin with because men are superior to women in almost everything that matters. So no, liberals most of the time cannot be masculine because they don't understand the inherent difference between men and women because they believe in blank slate equalism. Most liberals do, at least.
So you don't think that you can be masculine and not think that men and women are equal? Like you think that that's what triggers masculinity?
Well, in order for you to be masculine, you must accept and understand that women are inferior. And I'll explain what I mean by this. A masculine man, if his woman is attacked, is not going to sit there and be like, let me think about this. Or no, she's equal, she can handle it. He's just going to rise to the occasion and step in because he knows that she can't defend herself to the same level he does, that he can. So men that are hyper-masculine understand the biological differences and the inherent differences between the genders. That is why they are the masculine and the woman is the feminine. More progressive men tend to believe in equality. So, equality is a social construct. It's not real.
That's true.
And equality really was created to give women a chance. Because, if we want to be very, very painfully blunt about this, if we really believed in equality, there would be no WNBA. There would be no Title IX. Women wouldn't be playing sports. Because if we really believe in equality, we would make it merit-based, which means, okay, you guys want to have your own sports league? Cool. Are you guys able to be profitable? Oh, you're not? Okay. You're not profitable, so fuck the WNBA. But we allow women to play professional sports because we want them to feel inclusive, right? We want to be inclusive. But the reality is we would never fund the NBA if it was negative. But we fund the WNBA, even though it's negative every year, because we want to be equal. So equality only benefits really women. Affirmative action, double standards. Like all the double standards actually benefit women. The only double standard I could think of that benefits men is our ability to have sex with women abundantly without being shamed for it. But you have to earn that. Most guys don't have the capability, the skill set, the game, the attraction, or the sexual market value to have sex with a lot of women. Only a fraction of men can actually pull that off. So I would argue most double standards actually benefit women because they can double dip like I was saying before. They can go ahead and say, oh, I want to be a traditional woman in this regard, right, and find a super hyper masculine attractive guy. But at the same time, I reserve the right to, pursue an education to make money and become successful. And that's fine. But what I am saying is, if you want to pursue the education and make the money and, be, this girl boss, you're basically forfeiting your ability to find a guy at the end of the line that's going to want to take you seriously because that guy's not looking to date himself. He doesn't want a girl boss. He wants to date a woman that is the opposite of him. He wants a feminine, docile woman that's going to obey him. Women that are girl bosses tend to not obey men because that's why they're successful in the first place. They're a girl boss. they don't listen to other people. They have A-type personality. This is fantastic for making money and being successful, but terrible for a relationship, especially with a guy that's masculine. He doesn't want to date himself.
I think that there is a caveat to this. I think that there's a lot of people that live their lives conservative, but they still vote liberal because that's the way that they were taught to vote as they were raised. And I don't know what that is. I don't even know if you, because I think that there's a difference between being liberal and Democrat, even though they go hand in hand in being conservative and Republican. You can have conservative values, which are supposed to align with the Republican Party if you do. But then at the same time, I think that there are communities that teach themselves you could not believe in gay marriage, right? You could not align with the fact that you think that everybody is supposed to get a higher piece of what you contribute to society and higher taxes. You can have a lot of different views that align with being more conservative, but then still vote a certain way. And I see that happening in the Black community a lot, where um, we're taught, because we don't really even have the true understanding of what the difference is between a Democrat and a Republican. I think is becoming more pronounced today, but I think that we're taught to vote Democrat, even though we may live our lives conservative. Now, I will also say that I think that there's a lot more men that are becoming more liberal in the way that they live their lives. There's more gay men than ever before. There are guys that believe in equal rights. There are guys that follow their women to the polls and all of that other type of bullshit. But in a traditional sense, I think that most men tend to think more conservative, but they are conditioned to live their lives. And I think that most men are naturally more conservative. But I
Yeah.
think that because they're raised in mother households, because they're taught to live their lives a certain way, because we are indoctrinated in a church and in certain communities, a lot of times we are mistaken and we are confused, which is why you see a lot of guys evolve when they get older and past 30 years old. Once they start getting out and they actually start to experience life of their own and they get their heart broken and they're dealing with women, often at times you see that they start to evolve. And that is one of the problems that I think that people have with the red pilled space. They even have a misunderstanding of what red pill is. And that is the understanding of exactly how women are and the reality of what's going on in society in general. I don't think it's only applicable to just women. I think that being red pilled is also being, the reality of what we're dealing with in society and culture and war and difference between Israel and how we support them and our political space and how it is that we look at things from a business perspective and whether or not men are going to be supported when they do fail versus how it is that we treat women when they don't necessarily meet the expectations of what they thought feminism was supposed to be, right? So when we think about that and we really start to put it in perspective, men evolve over time to start realizing their purpose in life if they truly are becoming the men that they're supposed to be. That's why they start to seek out the father that they never had. That's why they start to have a conversation with other men that are successful or more masculine, and they start to evolve. And then you see a lot of these women online, a lot of times they start to get mad because they're saying, well, what is happening? Why are men starting to be attracted to certain conversations in the red pill space? It is because they have a natural yearning, in my opinion, for what masculinity truly is. And I think that you see that start to happen and transpire as men get older, as they get more successful, they become more conservative and they walk away. Even if they were raised in a single parent household, they walk away from the thing that they were taught, and women are starting to really get bothered by that. But I don't know.
I think we would solve a lot of problems if we just. I'm a proponent of repealing the 19th Amendment. I don't think women should even have the right to vote, if I'm going to be all the way honest with you. Because, and the reason for this is because, if anything, it should be the man that votes and represents the household. I agree with you that it's absolutely ludicrous where a woman can vote different than her partner. So I look at it like, if anything, it should be one vote per household and the man is the final deciding maker. And the other reason, too, why I don't think women should vote is because women tend to be single-issue voters. And what I mean by this is they typically vote for whoever's going to push, more abortions, more, it really comes down to reproductive choice is what makes women choose what they're going to vote for. So this is why they tend to vote Democrat. I mean, if we had to rely on the female vote, we would have Kamala Harris in office right now, which would have been a nightmare. So the other reason why I don't think women should vote is because they don't have the same duty to the country that the men do. Women don't have to enlist in the selective service. So as a man, if you don't go into the selective service at 18 years old, you could be fined $100,000 or go to jail. But a woman doesn't have to necessarily be involved in the selective service or register for it, and she's able to still get all the benefits of, of being a citizen and being able to get a government job and all this other stuff, while she doesn't have any skin in the game. You could go get sent to war off of someone that she votes for, and you don't have a say in it. So I look at it like, if women are going to go ahead and have a voice and be able to vote for the commander-in-chief who absolutely directs foreign policy, they need to have skin in the game. And then people might say, well, okay, well, Myron, how about we put women in selective service? Well, that's a no, too, because women shouldn't be in the military. There's a reason why they haven't been allowed to be in infantry. I don't think they should be in combat positions. There's a multitude of reasons why, but we could start with why they're physically inferior. So why are we going to effectively, weaken our military to make people feel better? That's stupid. And then on top of that, another ugly thing, we don't want women being prisoners of war, because that can absolutely put us in a very bad situation where we're trying to get our soldiers back. And, a female prisoner of war is a lot worse than having a male prisoner of war. Men are more expendable. Women are not. So that would put us.
We trade Brittany Griner for the.
I was about to say.
What was that?
We traded Brittany Griner for the Lord of War.
Yeah. Good point. Yeah, we literally traded. We traded Victor Bout. For those that don't know, the Merchant of Death. He was an arms trader that was arrested by the DEA in like 2008, 2009. Guy was selling all kinds of weapons all across Africa, and is literally responsible for a lot of the armed militias all across the Middle East and Northern Africa. And we went ahead and traded him to get back dumbass Brittany Griner. And what did she do? She came back here, because of the Biden administration, because it's obviously Democrats are all about race politics. We went ahead and gave this guy basically a pardon, who's a huge fucking criminal, to get Brittany Griner back, to play in the WNBA, which is it's a lose-lose altogether. The league loses money. We lose a big prisoner. We concede to the Russians. It's weak diplomatically. It's a L all around. But this is what happens when women get put in situations where they're prisoners of war or they're being political prisoners or whatever. We have to concede and put ourselves in a very precarious situation diplomatically to get them back, because, this is an ugly truth, but let's be honest here. Soldiers raping a U.S. citizen, right, to push their war propaganda is a very big reality. And it puts us in a very bad spot from a diplomatic position. So this is why the Israelis, I'll give you guys an example of how dire this is. The Israelis have something called the Hannibal Directive. The Hannibal Directive is an act that the IDF implements where when Palestinian militia groups break into Israel, or there's a conflict going on and they try to kidnap Israeli citizens, because that's what they do. They typically take IDF soldiers or Israeli citizens. The IDF has 100% authority, not just to kill the Palestinian militia members. They also have the authority to kill the Israelis. Why? Because if they kill them, that avoids the diplomatic nightmare of doing hostage negotiations and doing exchanges, because they know for every Israeli that makes it back into Gaza or to any of these areas that are occupied by Palestinians, they're going to have to exchange 100 to 1,000 Palestinians to get that one person back. So it puts them in a very bad spot. To give you guys an example of how crazy this is, there was a guy named, I think, Ghalid Shalat. He was an IDF soldier that was kidnapped. He was kidnapped like 2006-ish or whatever. He ended up getting released later on for roughly 1,000 Palestinians, right? One of the Palestinians that got exchanged was a guy named Yahya Sinwar. Yahya Sinwar became the head of Hamas before he was killed in October. And this guy was, a militant strategist. He understood Hebrew. He understood Jewish culture. He understood the IDF and their intelligence agencies. He spent 20 years in prison. And while he was there, he literally studied the Mossad, the Oman, Hebrew, all this stuff, which, Hebrew is not a language that a lot of people learn. They don't want people to learn that. So as an Arab guy knowing this made him a deadly foe. Well, guess what happened? He got back into Gaza, ran Hamas, and made their life a fucking hell. So this is why they implement the Hannibal Directive, because they're like, okay, if we go ahead and let one of our people get kidnapped and then we have to do a hostage exchange later, we might release someone that can come back and fuck us up later. And that's exactly what happened. So this is why they have the Hannibal Directive. And it was actually activated on October 7th, even though no one will admit that. Where a lot of these Israelis that were killed, the 1,200 Israelis that were killed, a lot of them were actually killed by IDF tanks, Hellfire, Apache helicopters, and by Israelis themselves, because they didn't want them to be taken as hostages, but they'll never report that. But the main point I'm trying to make here is, whenever you put yourself in a position where you have to do hostage negotiations, especially for sensitive people like women, it's going to put you in a very bad spot. We could look at the Brittany Griner situation. We could look at what Israel is dealing with when they have the hostage situation. I mean, they still haven't got their hostages back from October 7th. So this is why I don't think women should be in the military. And by extension, since they're not in the military, I don't think they should vote.